Dagda agus Fáilte. Hi, hello, and welcome. It's John O'Sullivan from the Irish Pagan School. And have you ever been curious about the bed of the couple and what that really means in Irish mythology? Well, if you're interested, stick around and I will dive into that and share it with you. But before we do that, I'd like to invite you to pick up over a year's worth of free resources on us at the Irish Pagan School. All you gotta do is go to irishpagan.school/free. So a big part of what we do here is, of course, getting real information out there, going back to the sources that's available to us, and stripping away or removing of any incorrect, inappropriate, or appropriated kind of content that has made its way into Irish mythology or specifically Irish spirituality. And there are few who have been more maligned or more kind of twisted by these incorrect perceptions and incorrect assumptions than the Morrigan. And the Morrigan is Ireland's goddess of poetry, prophecy, and battle. Um, but so many times people misconstrue information or kind of take leaps based on supposition, or mistranslation. Let's be fair, some of the people who translated these old stories, like way back when in the early 1900s, had their own biases as well. And so there's a lot of challenges. And actually, if we want to go right the way back, some of the medieval texts and themselves and how they're written down, um, showed their bias rather cleanly. And actually, that links into our story that we're going to share today. Um, so the story is about the bed of the couple, and the couple in question is the Irish god, the Dagda, and of course the goddess, the Morrigan. So, in order to understand it, we need to kind of understand where it sits in the literature and where it sits in the mythology. So, this comes from the Lyric of All Éireann, the book of the taking of Ireland, specifically the section around the Battle of Moytura, or the Second Battle of Moytura, when we're dealing with the forthcoming invasion of the Fomorians to the island, to conflict with the Tuatha De Danann, who are there in ascendancy at that time. So, the not to kind of retell you the entire like Battle of Moytura with all of its pre-tales, rave scale as they're called. But really what it comes down to, there's a failed king who's half a Moorian, half Tuatha called Bress. He proves himself unworthy of kingship by providing an incorrect judgment, not even incorrect judgment. It's referred to as a princely judgment. His judgment isn't kingly. He's not giving justice. He's not kind of making the right decisions. And that's only one part of his downfall. The other part is when he gives very poor hospitality. And he was warned by the bard that he gave bad hospitality to, but Kepra was like, I'll give you a warning, I'll give you a chance, you got to make up for this, or I will, place a satire against you, which was a formal kind of declaration performed by bards, which was legally recognized within the ancient Irish society. And so a satire was placed against Bress, saying that there was no hospitality in the House of Bress, and that couldn't really be sustained, as far as to the Dan or early Irish culture. So Bress was removed. He then went running home to his father Olatha in the Fomorians, and he's like, "You need to get an army for me to invade Ireland." And Alata was like, well, why should you take by force the thing that you lost because you couldn't manage it properly? And so not getting a response there, Bress goes to Indech, the Tethra, and Balor and convinces them to invade Ireland. So with that kind of going on the background, Nuada steps aside from the seat of kingship so that Lu can step into the seat of kingship, because Nuada's judgment is that Lu is the right one to lead the Tuatha De Danann to a victory in this forthcoming invasion. Um, this kind of sets the stage for the fulfillment of a prophecy, because Balor, the Fomorian kind of warlord, is said to be slain by one of his grandchildren, which is why he actually killed his grandchildren, or believed he did, but Lu had survived from the waves and been washed up in Ireland. So all of this is going on. It's an epic kind of tale, and I realize I'm actually getting into it and telling you far too much about it. But really, at the backdrop of all of this, There, when Lugh becomes king, Nuada decides that he needs to have a war council. He knows what's going to be coming down the line. And so he gathers a selected group of individuals and they go away for a year to have a discussion about what's going to come, the Fomorian invasion, how we're going to deal with it. And so he gathers like the druids, the cupbearers, the sorcerers. He gathers Gwivnu, the chief smith. He gathers Deankech, the chief leech or healer. And of course, he brings the Dagda. And so they have this discussion, they talk about all the plans, and one thing they realize is that they don't know where the Fomorians are going to land. And then Dagda has an idea, and he's like, I'll go figure that out for us. And so he leaves the meeting, and the meeting is actually referred to the meeting of the men of the goddess, which is very interesting, because it never specifies which goddess or who goddess, but it's referred to as the meeting of the men of the goddess. Now, is that then because they're two of the Danan or they are the tribe of Danu, and that's the goddess? That's what most people believe, but it's not specifically said. So anyway, the Dagda leaves this meeting, and he then travels across Ireland from that meeting because, and this is the quote, he kept a house in Glenetchin by the River Unshan. And so he goes there and, he waits by the river. And as he's waiting, he watches a woman arrive. And the woman stands with one foot on one bank and the other foot on the other bank. And she begins to undo the tresses in her hair, or the braids in her hair. And then she cleanses and washes herself from the river water above the ford. At which point then the Dagda comes forward and it says that they couple in the bed of in the ford of the River Unshan, and from then on it's called the bed of the couple because they or the lying down of the couple, depending on the translation. Um, and it's called the bed of the couple because they are a couple. And so the in this entire section in the lore, it's referred to as the woman, the woman, the woman. After their coupling, the woman gives prophecy and tells the Dagda where the Fomorians are going to land. And then the woman promises that she will take a hand in the battle and that she will take the blood and valor from the kidneys and heart of Indech, one of the invading Fomorian kings. And so that's how it's all presented. That's how the information is. But then in the last section, the last line of that section is, and this woman is the Morrigan. And it shows really her function in the capacity of prophecy, in the capacity of providing the insights and the information, knowing where the change is going to come from, knowing how it's going to trigger and move, but then also her direct intervention when those things are required. And this is where I will take a moment to say that the bias, like this bias of misinformation or maligning of the Morrigan begins right the way back in the medieval texts, because in parentheses or brackets right after and this woman was the Morrigan, there's another word put in there, and it's a Latin word, which we know is written by the monk who transcribed this story, and it's Lamia. Lamia being a reference to a female demon, and so it's glaringly interesting. And a lot of people say that like, oh well, we can't trust any of the stories because they're written down by Christian monks. The fact that the bias is so blatant, but also had to be put in brackets after the fact, really indicates that there was a faithful translation or faithful copying of the initial stories themselves. And so this is where we have the mention of the bed of the couple. And as a place of union and a place of kind of agreement, and it really is the core kind of story, the core kind of pointing between the relationship between the Dagda and the Morrigan. Now, as much as they are two of the most powerful, if not the most powerful gods of the two of the Danann, and we know that they're in a relationship, there's not many other parts of the stories and the mythology which talk about their relationship or talk about them being a couple. We know that Dagda becomes king in Ireland for 80 years, but it doesn't say that, he has a queen. But the Morrigan, is translated in ways as the Great Queen. So, or in also Phantom Queen because she's a queen in the other world too. So it's not that there's a king queen rulership or like partnership here. Um, and many times, like you would think that there would be more information about this powerful dynamic or this powerful couple, but there actually isn't. Apart from some small little pointers, like if Glenetchin is by the River Unshan, that's in the west of the country, and that's a place that the Dagda kept, as we know in the story. There's another place near Bruna Boyne, which is called Gáchik na Marne, or the Morrigan. So it's the two paps of the Morrigan. It's actually listed on the archaeology of the site around the Newgrange Passage tomb. It's in the field, the private land next to Newgrange, but right beside this very prominently Dagda-based location, we have this location which is also linked and kept as a space for the Morrigan in many ways. Um, so this is the information from the lore and the insight that we, the supposition or maybe my own kind of hot takes around it is a view of the Morrigan and the Dagda's relationship because there's not so much information about them. If we compare this to other kind of pantheons in other kind of cultures, there's this kind of core, like, father deity, this dispater, as Julius Caesar would say, and then there's their wife, and like, they center around so much of the narratives and like just complexities in the relationships between, say, Zeus and Hera, between Odin and Freyja, for example. But we don't get any of that in the Irish mythology. Now, whether or not there's missing stories, or whether or not the Morgan and the Dagda were just very private in their relationship and just kind of carried on doing the jobs that they had to do, is an interesting one. But the last thing I would say on that, is that at the time of the prophecy in the River Unshan, the Morrigan picked Indech. She specifically said, I will take the blood and valor from the kidneys and heart of Indech. And later on, when the battle actually kicks off, and everyone's gathered for the forthcoming conflict, the Morrigan rocks up and she has two fistfuls of blood. Now, she just walks in carrying these two fistfuls of blood, and no one says fucking nothing, and because she'd done exactly what she said she would do. But why him? Why not Balor? If she's a goddess of prophecy, maybe she knew or had the insight that Lu had to deal with Balor. But why not Tethra? Why specifically Indech? And I think for me, it's because she knew what was going to happen next. Because after the Dagda leaves her in the meeting of the bed of the couple, he goes to the landing point where the Fomorians are going to arrive, and he goes in disguise to try and prevent the war from happening. And the king he meets there is Indech. And at the pretty much like Dagda goes in rough raiment, kind of like presenting himself as a lowly kind of peasant person in some ways, trying to mitigate or prevent the war from happening, prevent it from kicking off. But what happens is that the Indech is bent on war. He's 100%, and he does everything he can to bend the rules of hospitality, to bend the rules of kind of care and just relationship for a guest in order to force the Dagda to go against him or to break like the rules of hospitality, which would then justify the invasion of the Fomorians from that perspective, which is, pouring out a vast cauldron full of gruel and offal into a pit in the ground. He doesn't even serve him like, properly in the food. He pours it into a ditch in the ground, and the Dagda is compelled to eat it. He then suffers greatly for it, the volume of it, because he has to finish it all, or he causes insult and justifies the invasion. The Dagda's body gets grossly distended because of it, so much so he can't actually move, but he doesn't cause offense. What follows then is that the daughter of Indech is actually sent to shame the Dagda to try and get him to kind of go against her. And sadly enough, she's not even given a name. She's just referred to as the daughter of Indech. And so she shames the Dagda by calling out against him. She then literally kicks the shit out of him. She physically assaults him. She then like, demeans him by having him carry her around Ireland in a naked state. And then the final part of it all is she pretty much non-consensually sexually abuses him. And he endures all of that because if he gives any kind of shame to her, that justifies Indech's invasion. So it's a difficult kind of part in the story, but when we look at that coupled with this view of the bed of the couple, and the Morrigan said specifically Indech, before Indech had even arrived in Ireland, she knew what was going to happen to the Dagda, and regardless of whatever happened to him, she was going to get her blood price back. And I think that more than anything gives a really good insight into the relationship of the Morrigan and the Dagda, and specifically the bed of the couple. So, thank you for joining me for this discussion. It's an interesting thing to go through and to view not just sections of the story, but how that section of the story links to the overall view and of the narrative and what that can tell us about the relationships and characters of our deities. So, if you'd like to know more, I'd like to invite you to join us at the Irish Pagan School. Go to irishpagan.school/free, sign up for a mailing list, and pick up some free resources. So, begin to grow deeper with your own explorations of these kind of things. So, you don't just have to take my word for it. You can actually get in and learn and explore this kind of content, or even just go to the Irish Pagan School itself and take a class. Take a class on the Dagda, take a class on the Morrigan. We have so much information available for you. And until next time, look after yourself. Take care. Agus Slán.